Well, hello, and good afternoon out there, world, Overflow world. Thanks so much for joining us on this wonderful day. Uh, as always, our purpose and goal for Overflow is to process the sermon from the day before and to really talk about what we learned, what stood out to us, to unpack it a little bit in order to better implement our learnings into our daily lives. So we are in week 3 going through our series Perspective, Seeing God, Self, and Others, where we are utilizing the Enneagram tool to gain clarity and language on how God has uniquely made us and designed us and wired us. Better knowing ourselves helps us to better love God, to love others, and to love ourselves as well. And so this past Sunday, Pastor Juno, who is not with us today, he taught through the type 2, through the story of Mary and Martha. And he unpacked for us a bit of type 2 and how that worked out in Martha's life. And so we are going to do 2 things today. First, we are going to unpack type 2 just a little bit more, a little further. And then number 2, we're going to jump into our reflection questions, which this week's focus of discussion is really on: what are your Enneagram strengths? What are your contributions, and how are you a blessing to others? So if you are tracking along with our series, or if you're new to our series, just to get you up to speed, if you have not yet, visit nl-cc.org/Enneagram and follow the steps there. Step 1 is taking the assessment. Steps 2 is reading the results of your assessment and figuring out which type you are. And then step 3 is a weekly discussion guide and additional resources to unpacking your Enneagram type. So we put a lot of work in. There's a lot of good resources there, so check it out. And so hopefully by this time you have taken the assessment, you've read up on your top results, and you've got some clarity on what type you think you are. Even if you're not 100% sure, it's helpful to kind of keep that top 1 or 2 types kind of in your hands loosely as we unpack the Enneagram. It will get more and more clear to you as we go through this process which type you are. So today, hopefully you are bringing your result of, hey, I'm a type 4, or I'm a type 6, or I'm a type 8, or whatever it is, and you've done some research on either Enneagram Institute and or our PDF that's on our Enneagram website, nl-cc.org/Enneagram, and you've gotten an understanding of your strengths. We've started off with this so that we can first understand that we are a blessing, that God has created us to be a blessing, that God has created all of us with strengths and contributions, that every Enneagram type, no matter what you are, is meant to be a blessing to the other types in relationship. And so hopefully you've done some reading on that. If not, go back and do that after this. You listen to this. The last thing I'll say is, if you're watching us live, thank you so much for joining us and for being here. We definitely love to hear your comments, so feel free to say hello. And even if you're watching this back later, we're super glad that you're with us. So let me give us a couple highlights of the Enneagram Type 2 and some things that kind of stand out about 2. So Type 2s are known as the helper. And your Type 2 friends are usually the ones who are ready to help. They're ready to assist. They're the ones probably most often showing up when there's a need. They are ready to help others, but often help themselves last. And so they are ready to help, but are often hesitant to receive help or to ask for help. That would almost be a shameful thing. And so a few things from our Perspectives PDF: their core desire is to feel loved and to feel useful. Their strengths: selflessness, really serving others. Contributions: they have this ability to see the needs of others and to meet them. They're very helpful. They're very able to see where there's a need and to meet that need and to jump in. Their core sin is going to be pride or codependency. Their identity ends up being found in their ability to serve or help others. And so the struggle is, hey, I was able to help, so I'm doing good, or my life is good. And so inevitably 2s will find their value and purpose in their ability to help others. So as they are unable to help others, or in situations where they're unable to help, they're really going to struggle. Their core fear is being incorrect or out of control. When healthy, they really make a difference. They're really generous. They're really humble. And it's a privilege to be a blessing to others. When they're unhealthy, they're defensive, they're manipulative, they feel victimized whenever anyone needs their help. They have a tendency to become domineering, to feel entitled, and they might even believe that they're just unlovable. And so that's what a place of unhealth really looks like. And so as far as their strengths and their struggles, they've got many good things going on. And one scripture verse that's helpful is when Peter is talking to Jesus, and he says, "You shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered him, "If I do not wash you, you have no share with me." And so there's this temptation for the helper to not need help. But ultimately, as we come to Jesus, salvation is unattainable without God's grace through Jesus Christ. So I just want to ask you, joining us today. Oh, by the way, we have Ryan Bogert and Aaron Wood with us today. I've kind of just been talking for like the whole thing. Sorry, guys. But what stood out to you from the sermon? What stood out to you about type 2s that you think is important? Let's chat on that for a few minutes before we talk about our own types, our strengths, contributions, etc.
Yeah. I'm married to type 2. So my husband is a type 2. And then I also have 2 as a wing because I'm a 1. So I really resonated a lot with Juno's sermon, on both levels. But one thing that really stood out to me was when Juno was talking about how to love a type 2. And he told this story about when he was going through a hard time and a friend came to him and said, what do you need? Or like, how are you doing? He's like, fine. Right. It's really easy to say, I think, especially for 2, say, oh, I'm fine. I don't need anything. Right. And his friend was like, no, you have to need something. Like, what do you need? And then, oh, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. And then, he said it was in Arizona. Right. So he said they do fall flowers and you usually plant like new flowers in the fall. And his friend said, have you done your fall flowers yet? And he said, no. And he said, draw me what you want to do. And then a few days later, there was a whole team of people there, like putting in new flowers and just making the front of their home just really beautiful. And he talked about what a blessing that was. And like, I really resonated with that story because I know for my husband, to show him love and care, a lot of times I feel like I take that extra step, like Juno's friend did. Right. So it's not just enough to say, what do you need? But to be maybe more specific and say, do you need this? Right. Because my husband is so good at seeing where everyone else can be helped. He's so good at looking at someone's situation and saying, we're going to bring that person a meal, and then just doing it, and sometimes to the point of like, for me, like he'll help someone in public, will be like, are you sure they need help? Are you sure they want help? But it's just very natural for him to offer his assistance. Like that's just the way he views the world, is just, to look at a situation and see how he can help or contribute or make it better. And he's really good at just noticing when other people need things. But for himself, then he's not, it's not always as natural for him to ask for help or to even maybe recognize when he needs help with something. And so Juno's example of his friend that was very specific and chose a specific thing that they knew they could help with, and then said, we're just kind of ran with it and just said, I'm going to do this. And this team of people, we're going to do this. And I thought that was really helpful when talking about like how to love someone who's just a helper and just is so good at helping others, sometimes to the expense of themselves. And can just give and give and give and give because they can just always see where they can be giving of themselves. And so I thought that was really helpful for me.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think one of the things
and I think like what I'm hearing.
Oh, go ahead.
No. Okay. Sorry. I think one of the things that I'm hearing is in terms of how we love a 2, I'm not married to a 2, so I'm married to a 1. But what I'm hearing is like, I think it's really important for 2s to feel, I think it's really important. You have to be intentional to make the relationship reciprocal, especially if you're like not married to this person. For example, if you have a friend who's always doing things to help you out, that can become an uneven relationship if you're not intentional about also helping them out and helping them out back. And I know that in the unhealth, twos, when they're unhealthy, twos can become very frustrated and then resentful and been like, I'm always giving to you guys, I'm always giving, and that can be the shadow side or the bad part of a two. Whereas a healthy two goes to an Enneagram 4 in the sense where the 4 is the individualist, and for the two, that becomes, I can express what I need. Not only do I live into my strength of taking care of other people's needs, but I also recognize where I have needs. And an unhealthy two could also struggle to recognize their own needs and then operate on burnout and then become resentful and become frustrated. Whereas a healthy two sets boundaries where they can be really, really helpful the best they can without taking it too far, without breaking down, without burning out, and expressing, these are my needs. These are where I need my space to recharge, or things like that. Yeah, I don't know if, Aaron, when you're thinking about Leon, if you see how that can apply to him or affect him, or if you want to share the personal side of that, because I'm talking more ideas kind of thing. But yeah, so I think it's important to make sure you are being reciprocal in your relationship with twos, and that you're not just taking them for granted. Because I feel like if there's any Enneagram type that can be taken for granted for what they do, it's twos, because they won't speak up for themselves often. So anyways, that was a lot of thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's super true. And it's just like, because it's just so natural for them to just keep seeing and giving and seeing the needs that I think the rest of us, if we don't naturally view the world that way all the time, it does take more attention to look at that person and say they're always giving of themselves in this way, in very practical ways. A lot of times twos, it's like very practical help, like just really great, wonderful helpers. But yes, it can be very easy, to not forget, but just like, they're just always helping other people. And it's like, I need to very intentionally and sometimes very specifically care for you, or like find out where your needs are, or maybe sometimes with the two, helping them figure out what they need. Because I think sometimes they're so focused on others that it's just, it really takes some intention sometimes for a two to sit back and say, what do I need in this moment? And then to be able to articulate that in some way. And so for walking alongside it too, I think that's the way that we can very practically help, is to help them process, like, what do you need in this moment? And how can I help you with that? Which might be a harder thing for a two than maybe for some of us who aren't twos. I definitely relate to what you're saying.
Yeah. And I think I would say, if you're married to two, or if you are a two, one of the best things you might need to do is really practice saying, what are my needs and how do I make sure I'm okay and caring for myself so that I can give from a healthy place? Because your instinct is to give and help no matter what. How can I do that from a place of health? Might be one of the most important questions. So,
yeah, I think one of the things that stood out to me about the two from Gino is when he talked about talking to a friend that's a type 2 and kind of saying, how's your faith going? How's your relationship with God? And then they respond by listing all the activities they're doing or the ways that they're serving, and then say, no, I don't mean what are you doing for God? How is your time with God? And for the two to engage in their faith, engage with God by serving, just like Martha, rather than interacting personally with Jesus at his feet, was so busy serving and doing all these things. And there's a biblical, calling for hospitality. And I think this is a biblical and good practice. But when we care for others so much that we can never be with others, I think that kind of misses the mark there. And so I think that stood out for me. If you're a two, or a two, what does it look like to have a relationship with God? I think you've got to try a little bit more at having that intentional time with God, and also sharing your needs and your challenges with God and inviting him to help you, So I think that would be my encouragement, and to watch out for, are we serving in place of intimacy with God, rather than out of intimacy with God, right? It's like twos can almost serve their ways into worship, or serve their ways into relationship with God. And it's got to be the opposite. It's got to be worship and intimacy with God. And out of that comes a place of joyful giving and serving. So I think, that's the thing that kind of stood out to me. Let's switch gears.
I think there might be a little delay on our Zoom that's causing us to be a little, but I was going to say, I just want to say really quick, not only with God, But I think that same idea can also apply with others. Are you just helping others to the point where you're not having intimacy and sharing where you're really at with them? Because you're always like, no, I'm fine. I'm the one who gives and I'm fine. Whereas, good relationship is we're both sharing equally and there's intimacy in it. So I think, I don't know. I heard what you said about that in relationship with God. I think that can also be true in our relationship with people too. For those of us who are Enneagram 2s, especially, or are wired kind of like that. So anyways.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. Good thoughts. Okay, let's switch gears now into our discussion questions for this week. And let's just take a little time. There's 8 of them. And so rather than give 1 minute to each one, just kind of share what you think. But the questions for this week are based on your Enneagram type results. What are your strengths? What do you contribute to the environments you find yourself in? How are you a blessing to yourself and to others? How do you see the world? What it does? What does it need? What's wrong with it? How can you help or contribute? How much does your strength translate into spiritual strength? What are you naturally good at when it comes to faith with these strengths? What are you then not so good at? And how can you contribute your strengths to help others with their faith? So these are all the questions. And so I want you guys, we're going to just kind of choose what stands out to you, but based on what you know and understand about your type, what are your strengths? How do you contribute to others? And how does it integrate with your faith in Jesus?
I'll say, just to start, I think it's really cool that we're doing it like this because for those of you listening, you're going to be in a small group. Some of you are going to be leading small groups. And I think the purpose of these week's questions is to really give everyone a chance to express themselves and how they understand their Enneagram and the strengths they bring to the table. And I think that's such a good tool to build the relationship within your small groups and get to know your people better, deeply who they are, in a way that talking about, a chapter of the Bible doesn't allow someone to bring who they are to the forefront and talk about themselves. So I think this is just a unique discussion and it's really cool. And now when we're talking about it now in Overflow, we can give an example and also then you get to know us better as staff and as, people in the church. So anyways, so I just think it's good that we're doing this and it'll be good. And I think there's a lot of good things that could happen in small groups as a part of this. For me, I'm an Enneagram 5. I think my one of the biggest strengths of the Enneagram 5 is knowledge and a pursuit of knowledge. And I think one of the funny ways I think this manifests itself in me is whenever anyone asks a question, I think hello, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, it's good.
Oh, okay. It said my internet connection was unstable. It popped up. Okay, and you guys froze. Okay. But I think for me, like whenever anyone asks a question like, I don't know, when did this happen? Or what year did this happen? Or what's going on with this thing in the world? Like my thing is like, if you ask a question and you don't know the answer to it, why would you not immediately Google it and find the answer? So I'm always the person just like, if someone asks a question and I feel like I have a lot of knowledge about a lot of random things, not everything, but a lot of random things. But if I don't know the answer and I know it's Googleable and we can find it out like that, I'll always whip out my phone, Google it, and be like, oh, it's this. And so like, I just think it's a sense of like, I'm always pursuing knowledge and I want to know more. And I think that I bring a lot of knowledge. I know a lot about a lot of things. There's certain things that I would say I'm kind of an expert in, which is a strength that Enneagram 5 is becoming experts in certain things. And there are things where I'm like the opposite of an expert, but that's a whole nother thing. And bringing that to the table, I think is just interesting. Like, I think that I have a lot to share in certain things and conversations. There's a lot of really like deep places about a lot of different topics I can go with people and talking about people, and that can create shared interest, that can create connections, and I often connect best through talking about those sorts of things with people. Whether it's, for me, whether it's talking about things about the Bible and faith, talking about politics, sports, those are all areas where I have a lot of investment in, and it's even something like the Enneagram. I know a lot of things about the Enneagram because I do find it to be a very interesting topic. So all of those things are areas which I like to explore with people and I connect with people. I I connect with those ideas and yeah. So I don't know. Those are just some of my personality traits and some things that I think are strengths that I bring to the table. Yeah.
Why don't you go, Ryan, since I did one last week? So I feel like that's really fresh on everybody's minds, but we haven't gotten to hear much from the later numbers.
Yeah, well, Enneagram Type 7 here, the enthusiast. Basically, you know, my strength, I'm going to bring joy, excitement, passion, yeah, and just a general enthusiasm. I think what's nice about it is it can go towards anything. And so you could say, hey, we're going to have lunch at this restaurant and I'm going to, this is awesome. Like, this is going to be the best lunch ever, you know? Or you could say like, hey, I've got some fun plans to go camping this week. This is going to be the best camping trip, the most epic, like wonderful time. So you can kind of look at type sevens as like the nitrous oxide that you add to like cars, you know, to just kind of give them that extra boost. You know, the other thing that sevens do is they can easily turn any bad situation into something good. And just like, man, I got in a car accident last week. At least you're okay and you're alive. And you know what? Like, you're going to be doing great. And so, you know, it's easy to kind of turn those things around. I think sevens really contribute joy into any situation. Sevens often bring like the hype at a party or a gathering and get people excited. I think sevens can be good at casting vision and getting everyone around a common cause. I think about memories of like being at a concert and like getting everyone to like clap. I'm like the first one clapping, like, let's go, guys. Come on, let's do it. You know, like initiating anything, or like, hey, let's start a wave at the baseball game. You know, sevens are the ones to kind of initiate that extra hype. And they can contribute a really positive outlook in any situation. Sevens often bring comfort to painful situations, not by acknowledging the pain, but by putting a joke out there or like moving on to something silly. I do this with my own kids. I was recently with my kids yesterday morning, and two of them were crying, devastated, that nothing would soothe them. And I started licking a towel and beatboxing, and they just went from tears to joy very quickly. And then they were all licking the towel and beatboxing with me. It was a clean towel, so Aaron, don't get too upset. It was fresh and clean. I know it just sounds ridiculous, but that's what sevens do. They just do ridiculous things and kind of bring that out. When it comes to faith, you know, I think I've learned that my strength is going to be in expressive, passionate worship and just passion about anything God's doing. We're going to be having baptisms in a few weeks at the church, and I met with our baptism candidates yesterday, and I'm just super excited for them, hearing their stories and just excited for them to get baptized. And so just contributing general enthusiasm in my own faith, but also around other people. And so if it's like, hey, we're planning a worship night, it's like, this is going to be a great worship night, and let's do this, and let's do this, and let's add this in, and let's spice it up here, and this will make it really epic. And so it's just all these kind of general ideas to kind of get things going. And so sevens can contribute a lot of vision and excitement and passion. And I think that really helps others with their faith. I think sevens help to infuse that passion, that joy, that excitement for the Lord and for God and for what he's doing. Because when you see someone that's super excited about something, you start to go like, oh yeah, I guess it's pretty awesome. Okay, yeah, like I can be excited too. And so that's kind of generally, how I function as a seven.
Cool. And I guess that leaves me. So I was last week, so I'm a 1. And to be honest, for my outlook as a 1, I have to think I can be very critical of myself. 1s really focus a lot on rightness and goodness and doing things the right way. And so it can be hard for me to sit with these kinds of questions and say, you know, what do I bring to the table? But then also like, what do I, need to work on? And so let's see. Yeah, I think 1s are very reliable and consistent. I know I'm always looking for the right way to do something. And so then one of my pitfalls then is recognizing that there's not always one right way to do something, right? And I can also struggle with grace for myself and for others, because naturally, if I'm looking for the very right, the very best thing, sometimes it's very easy to see, where things aren't the very right or the very best. And so, sorry, I lost my train of thought. So as a 1, I think, I know for me, like, as far as like church and ministry, like I've always been drawn to like doing things well and doing things the right way. And so for me, I've often found myself in roles like for example, like Ryan Clement, you said you often like cast vision. So for me as a 1, I get really excited saying, okay, this is something our church wants to do, or this is somewhere we want to go. Like, let's find a good path to get there. And so for me, my natural approach is like, I can look at something and I can say, okay, so here is a good path we can take to make this a reality. Like, here's how we can get from A to B. So sometimes big picture vision doesn't always come naturally, but seeing a vision, I can look at something and find a good way to get there. And I think, maybe that's not true for all 1s, but I know for me, my oneness definitely manifests itself in that way, where like finding that. So like moving things along or like doing things the right way. I think 1s can often really just be dependent upon to do things as expected or to meet expectations or, want clearly defined expectations because they want to meet them in that way. So so I think that's kind of where I land on that. Did I answer we were just picking 1. So that's kind of where my thoughts are right now.
Yeah, I think that's great. And what I'd be encouraging for all of our viewers and listeners is to really see your type as full of strengths. And I think it was Christy Gaultier that said the majority of people, when they find out their Enneagram type, are disappointed. They're hoping that that's not them. They're like, oh, really? That one's me? Like, oh, couldn't I be like something better? Except for 7s. 7s are stoked that they're 7s because and I feel the same way when I took the Enneagram test. I was like, 7, this is the best type. Yes. And that's just how 7s are. So, but I think it's number 1, it's really important to know we all have strengths. Like, God has created us uniquely and all with strengths. They're going to be different. And we spend too much of our lives looking at other people's strengths and thinking that ours are invalid, not needed, or irrelevant or not good enough. And that's not true. We all have strengths and we were all created to contribute. If you look at 1 Corinthians 12, when you see how the body of Christ is intentionally a variety of different pieces and parts that all compose one body, and every part needs the other part in order to function well as a body, so is true with the Enneagram. The Enneagram also helps us to see through the biblical lens that we all have value, that we all contribute. And when we can know and understand our strengths, we can much better contribute them in our relationships, in our community. And I think the inverse of that is that we need to value other contributions. So one of my temptations has been, if you're not super stoked about what we're doing, you're in my way. You're bogging me down. You're just now an obstacle. You're doing the opposite of what's important. And a lot of my life, I have spent time getting really excited about something. And then someone responded, well, what about this problem? Or what about that problem? And I would perceive that as, you are just a negative Nancy or a negative Ned, or you're just in my way. And what I've seen as I've grown in maturity is that a lot of like what Erin's talking about, she sees vision and she's already charting a pathway to get there. And some of that pathway might be presenting the obstacles to get there. As a 7, I might perceive that as, oh, she thinks this is a bad idea. She doesn't want to get behind it. She's saying her way is better. But rather, she's actually trying to contribute and saying, okay, if we really want to get there, I think we got to watch out for these things and avoid these things, but also embrace these things. And if we go here, then I think we could really get there. And so seeing other people as having valuable contribution is an important part. Knowing what your type is, knowing what other people's types are, helps us to better work together and collaborate in a God-honoring, Christ-like way and love one another. So those are some of my final thoughts. Any final thoughts from you guys?
Yeah, and I think as an Enneagram 5, I often have the best things to say when I'm responding to other people's thoughts because I take the idea and I like build on it. And that's what I'm gonna do right now. But just similarly to what you're saying, like when it comes to like a staff, like, we have an equipping team who we meet every Tuesday here at church. Having Enneagram diversity within a staff is really important. Because let's say everyone on a staff was, I'll start with you, Ryan, I'll pick on you. Everyone on staff was an Enneagram 7. There will be so much excitement in that room, and everyone in the room will be like getting so pumped up and like feeding off each other's ideas, and it'll be like the most electric, exciting room you'll ever be in. And then when it comes to then implementing, there might be times like where it kind of breaks down and becomes messy. And, you know, like, I don't know, maybe Ryan, you could help describe what you think that might become more. But it's just like, if you have all Enneagram 7s, then there won't be people like Aaron Wood, who then figures out the best like structure, way to do it, and the method to the madness in a sense. Not that you're, you know, you have madness, Ryan, but no, but, you know, but like, there's a sense of just like the Enneagram types are designed to like work together. Like if you get an Enneagram room full of 2s, they'll all just be like, well, how can I help you? No, how can I help you? Wait, who's the one who's like casting the vision and taking the lead in this? Like, you know what I mean? Where not that an Enneagram 2 can't cast vision or take the lead necessarily, but I'm just saying like we're all made differently, and the best teams, I think, are put together of different types and different strengths so that they can all fill each other out. Because you might think like, oh, like the temptation with the Enneagram, I think sometimes is like, oh, like shouldn't everyone do it like this? Isn't the right way to do it because that's how we're wired. But the truth is, if everyone was like you, then that blind spot that is part of your type would be everywhere. And I think like when we put all of our strengths together in a puzzled piece and we complement each other really well, then we function the best. For example, I'm married to a 1, and I am very different than a 1. I am like, Enneagram 1 might be the type I feel like I am the least naturally. But the fact that my wife's a 1 and I'm a 5 means that between the two of us, we have a lot of strengths, and like we're actually good, really, really good at meeting whatever life throws at us, because she takes certain things, I take certain things, and we put it together and it works really well. There are very few things in life where we're met with it and we both go like, I don't know how to do that, because one of us has the strength to like deal with it in a sense. So I don't know. That's what all I was thinking about as you were talking about that. You know, and I think that's why it's so important to value differences, to not think of your type as better or the right way to do things. Recognizing the strengths of your type and the challenges of your type. And yeah, I think when we come to small groups, like, you know, when you hear your small group members talk about their type, affirming them, being like, yeah, like, for example, yeah, Ryan Clement, I really see that energy and that joy that you bring to the room. Like I've experienced that, and how you've, you know, brought energy to our staff meetings and excitement for events going on in the life of our church. So I don't know, finding ways to affirm people in that can help you connect with them, and really help make this Enneagram series more than just learning a little bit about ourselves, making a way to connect with each other, to understand each other deeper. And then that's what small groups about, building that connection, building that community, building that intimacy, and building that as we walk in faith together, in community together. So, yeah.
That's so good. Yeah, I guess I would just add that I think just hearing you guys talk about how this has helped us as a staff and as groups and in our marriages. I think something that was the most revolutionary for me with the Enneagram when I first started to learn it was just understanding that, like, for all of us, when we approach like a problem or an issue or a project, it's like we're going to approach it looking at the world from a different way. And for me, that was one of the biggest things, was understanding and giving language to how we all see the world. And in our God-given strengths, we see the world in a different way. Like, so one's going to look for the right thing, a 2 is going to look for how they can help, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And just with that shared understanding and that knowledge, it really helps as we work together as a team, as a community, as a church, for the gospel and for our community. And just when we all come together to accomplish things, to do things, Sunday services, projects, ministries, it makes us even stronger, because we understand our own view of the world better, and we understand others' view of the world better, and really being able to bring all those strengths together for what God has called us to do. And that's just been such a powerful thing. And I'm really excited that we're continuing this as a church, and just continuing these kinds of conversations, because it just changes the way that we approach things and the way that we do things and the way that we live in the relationship. And it's also good. So it's just good.
Yeah. And can I just say, building off of what you were saying, like, I feel like doing the Enneagram like this is really an exercise in empathy. We are taking the muscle, figuratively, the muscle that is empathy, and making it stronger, and a stronger muscle and bigger. And when we do that, that allows us to understand other people better, which allows us to love them better, truly, by getting where they're coming from, not just by being nice to them, but that allows us then to figure out how I can meet this person where they're at, their needs, and love them better. And ultimately, that helps us all to live more Christ-like, which is what we're here for. At the end of the day, as Christians, is what we're trying to do. It's in our name. We are Christians. We are following Christ. We're trying to be like Christ. That helps us to do that. So I just think there's so much good in this series. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, well said. Well, yeah, thanks for sharing, guys. Really appreciate it. And, I think one of our tendencies is to leave things as like intellectual understanding and to not really implement it. And part of the whole vision of the Overflow show is to integrate what we're learning into practical everyday life. And so as you're learning your strengths, as you're understanding your strengths, live into them, be aware of them, contribute them to situations and people. And value other strengths. These are some things. So think about that this week at home, at work, in your neighborhood, at school, on your team, like wherever you find yourself this week. Be intentional to contribute your strengths, to value the strengths of others, and to really be a blessing. Our goal is not just to learn Enneagram, but to be like Christ in every situation. And so let's do that this week. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next Monday at noon or whenever you're watching, and God bless. So thank you.